All right, how's it going? Wanted to do a quick video. Well, it's probably not going to be quick, to be honest. There's probably a lot to cover here, but I wanted to do a video on buttons and sizing and basically all of the things that I didn't know when I started, and just kind of pass on the information to some of the newer folks so that they can, order buttons and be confident about getting buttons. Like when I first got into spinners, I saw all these cool buttons, but I never bought them because I was like, is that going to fit? Is that going to work? And I was just so confused by the whole process that it really took me a long time to get into buttons. And the way that I kind of, ended up getting into them was just buying different spinners and trying to put them on different spinners. And then once I did that, I started to realize that, like, generally, most buttons work with most spinners. Generally, like, if you've got like a standard size spinner, most buttons are compatible. You can switch and swap them around. But it does go a little bit deeper than that, so I wanted to try to cover it in the video. So where to start? So I put out pretty much all my best spinners and best buttons right here, and I tried to get a variety of different shapes and sizes so you can get an understanding of how this works. So I guess I'll start with like your standard size button. Okay, so this is a standard like 24.5 millimeter button. This is a Modusworks button, not deep. It's like the light kind of steps, but this is a 24.5 millimeter button, and generally this sort of button is going to work with most spinners. Like from what I have out on the table, this would work here, this would work here, this would work here, this would work here. So generally, if you see, like a 24 millimeter, 24.5 or below, it's generally going to work with your spinner. To kind of cover the whole like sizing aspect of it, I would highly recommend grabbing a pair of calipers. These are fairly cheap, but spinners are usually done, or spinner buttons are usually done, or shoes. I like calling them shoes more, but I'm just trying to keep this easy for the noobs. So if I say shoes, then it's interchangeably with buttons. But you get a pair of calipers, and then you can measure the total width of a button, or the diameter, I should say. So you'll see this one's about 24.2. These calipers aren't the best. This button's probably more like 24.5. But that's how you can measure and tell what size your button is. So then you've got let me open this button up and kind of explain the insides of a button. So generally you're gonna have, your post. Some buttons have like it's already milled out, like the screw is kind of milled out on one side, and then the female end is, usually like dedicated. But on a lot of buttons these days, I'm noticing is that the post can be put on either side, so it's interchangeable. There's some benefits and downsides to that. So the ability to be able to move this post over to this side is great. However, on some buttons that I've bought, these grub screws aren't always super tight, so they kind of can loosen up as you're spinning a lot. And you can fix that with some Loctite or whatever. You could Loctite the grub screw and it'll stay on one side and generally not come undone. But then you've kind of got the portion that goes in the hole here. So that little protruding section goes through the hole, and then you've got this final step right here, and that step is what makes contact with the ring around the center of a bearing. So essentially, both sides are going to press down on they're going to wrap the whole body, and then these steps, this is going to go through the hole, and then the steps are going to make contact with the ring, and it's going to be kind of pressed down so that you can spin freely, so that only the ring is being held down and not anything else. So that's generally how a button works. And then I did want to kind of cover, I guess I should cover the different shapes and sizes here. So for example, this is a 28 millimeter button. So this is a Post Blades Cocoon XL. They take the 28 millimeter buttons. You could run, smaller buttons if you want. You could always go down. You can't put a button that's bigger than the the hole for the button, but you can always put a smaller one on. Just won't look as good normally. So you want to try to get it, you know, as close as possible. Like I believe Pose actually made this button, or actually this is a Nils button, but it had a Pose Blades COA on it, so maybe they comboed on this or something. But anyway, yeah, these are 28 millimeter buttons, and these are really thin. So there's a difference between, you know, thin buttons and, you know, like more fat buttons like these. So you can see these are pretty chunky, and then if I take this off, you'll see that this is a very, very thin button. So look how thin this thing is. So this button is super, super thin. And it's great for this spinner specifically because of the shape of this spinner. This spinner in general is not very thick. So having these thin buttons is great. I should also mention that you're going to get a different sound profile from different size buttons. Generally sound comes from the bearing, that's true, but the button definitely affects the sound. So the closer you're able to get, you know, to the actual bearing with your buttons, and as flush as you're able to get them, I found that that's like, you know, ideal for sound if you're a sound person. So I guess I should just rip this real quick. So here, this makes a beautiful sound. Listen to that. So I'm getting a lot of that sound, number one, from the bearing, but number two, because the buttons are very, very close to the actual bearing. So, you know, you get increased sound with that. Now these buttons over here that I actually put on the axis, they also were made for this spinner specifically, but I was able to put those on here. I should cover how that I did that too, because if I were to try to screw this down on this spinner specifically, without using, you know, shims in a longer post, this would just grind. So let me show you how I was able to accomplish that. So I use shims. So you see these little copper shims here. I actually used two on this one because I wanted to get some extra height because it was really, really close to grinding. So I put some shims. Let me take that off. So I put some shims on one side here. These are what shims are, and all that does is just extend the step. So see how the step is much higher now with these shims on? So now that's going to make the distance away from the body of the spinner higher, so that I'm able to, you know, rip it without any sort of grind. At one point I had them with just one, and it was like super, super close to touching, but I found the more I rotated my hands, sometimes I could catch a little grind, so I put two on. But generally you're just going to need one. I think I only have one on this side. And then in order to do that, so sometimes when you're going to shim a button, you're going to want longer posts, grub screws. So there's a pack on Amazon. I'd be happy to share it with you. I've sent it to so many friends to buy, but you can get a pack of these grub screws that are longer. So you can, and there's all different sizes. I think I actually have it nearby. I should show you guys if I do. Hold on. I got it right here. Okay, so these are the screws that I'm talking about, and you can grub screws. So you can see there's all different sizes, right? So there's like different heights. Generally, you're looking for, I think it's M4 that a lot of spinners use for grub screws. So this pack has been perfect because it has M3s, M4s, and M5s. So far, I haven't found a button that I have that I can't find a grub screw for in this pack, and this is available on Amazon, so highly recommend picking that up. And then the shims I picked up off of eBay, and a lot of the OGs in the community helped me out with this, so that was great, and hopefully this video can help some of the noobs as well. So going back to, you know, thickness and thinness, so this is another, like, this is a nice NISE nice button. Very thin. I found that I get a lot of good sound when I use this button. However, it doesn't work with a lot of things in my collection. Like, for example, if I tried to put it on this guy, I'm not going to, just because I don't want to make this video crazy long, but see how thin they are? Then you would end up having to, like, pinch down into the spinner, which is uncomfortable. So for this spinner specifically, these more thick buttons tend to work really, really well. So So yeah, that's ideal for a thick spinner. So it really kind of depends on what your spinner, how thick your spinner is. Here's another good example of using thin buttons. I actually should have put these on there. I'm gonna do it real quick. Why not? Might as well throw these thins on here just to see what it looks like, spice things up a little bit, and it doesn't really take that long. But if you have a thin spinner, you can use the thinner buttons because you won't have to pinch down as much. I should be doing that on camera. So I'll put this in here, screw this down, and man, that already looks cool. So yeah, this is just like a OG Horizon with the thin nice buttons, and it works perfect. There you go. And then you've kind of got some buttons, like this is another nice button, NISE, hopefully I'm saying that right. And these are kind of thin, but I found that they work perfect on this monolithic, I always forget which one's which. But see how this one just sticks up enough? So it's like, it's really comfortable because this button actually works, ideally with this spinner because, it's not too thin, it's not too thick, and I'm just getting the perfect amount of clearance on this guy to be able to get some good rips. And then listen to that sound. A lot of that is due to I'm running a gimbal bearing in there, which is stainless steel balls in a ceramic body, so they tend to be very, very loud. But yeah, before I put these buttons on, it still made good sound, but once I put these guys on, it really, really upped the sound, which I love. I love the sound of this spinner. What else? Oh, then so sometimes you do get some spinners. This is, I think, the only spinner that I have that has like these proprietary buttons. So let me show you the shape of this. So if you had one of these or were thinking about buying a button for one of these, I can't find anything that really works on it because look how they're concaved. So they're actually like made specifically for this spinner. I would say generally I haven't found a spinner that, aside from this one, that's like this, that uses proprietary buttons. So I wouldn't really worry about it unless you see like a really weird shape or like something like that on one of your buttons. I wouldn't be afraid to try different buttons. So I guess I could show you what would happen if I tried to use a different button on this spinner, because I've tried, trust me, I've tried to shim it, I've tried to do everything I can to get it to work, and it just doesn't. So number one, it's too fat. And then if I tried something like this guy, and this I believe is like a 19 millimeter button. If I tried something like this guy, it doesn't have that concave shape, so it's gonna grind. You see that? Like I can't rotate it in here. So only really works with the proprietary button, unfortunately. And then I guess last but not least, I should kind of cover just generally sizing, how to size a button if you're going to order a custom button, because NJT makes these amazing buttons, and I think more people should reach out to NJT. But when I first did, he asked me for measurements, and like right there at that moment I was like, huh? And I didn't really know what to do, so it kind of delayed my my purchase from him, because I didn't know how to size it really. But it's honestly a lot easier than you would think. It's a pretty simple process. So if you're gonna order a button from NJT or just from anybody who's selling custom buttons, all you have to do is just measure the stock button. So I showed in the beginning of the video how to measure the circumference or diameter, whatever you want to say. So when you order from NJT, he's going to ask you for the diameter and total height. So you're just going to do like this. You're going to get your diameter. I guess I ordered these in like 24 millimeters, so they're about 24 millimeter. And then you want to get the total height. So total height is about 15 millimeter, and that's generally the height that's going to work on most stuff. So if you get like a 23 millimeter button, 22, somewhere between 22 and 24, and you get the 15 millimeter height, generally it's going to work. I should talk to NJT and just tell him maybe to just make a standard, just like a standard button size that's already pre-sized, so that he can get more sales, because I know it definitely scares people off who don't really understand the sizing aspect of it, and that's fine. I didn't understand it either. But yeah, that's it. This video is super long. I didn't really want it to go 15 minutes, but it's 15 minutes. It is what it is. If you have any questions, or you need to know where to get the shims, or you need to know where to get the grub screws, I will try to link those in the video description. But that's it. Everybody have a great weekend.